My name is Gavin Andrew Benjamin. How did I end up in the show? I was invited to the show by curators Sean Buford and Sylvia Rohr. And the show consists of five artists, young black or emerging artists together in a Mattress Factory. For this show, the subject is home. And home means quite a few different things to many different people. For my mom, it's always, you need to sit down and set down roots, and I'm still hearing that from my mom. For me, there's no physical place for home really. My parents were immigrants, grew up in New York, went to school in New York, moved to Pittsburgh, my late 20s, left Pittsburgh, came back to Pittsburgh in my 40s. I think Pittsburgh is kind of home, but it's not fully home. It's a place where you belong, but you don't really belong if you're someone who is an outsider. It's a good place. The art community is very wonderful. When I was asked to be part of the show, I was thinking of what is home, and I was thinking of where I'm living right now. And I was thinking, will I be here in 5 years? Will I be here in 10 years? That's a question that I'm still trying to sort of wonder. For me, when I was thinking about home for this project, I was thinking about what it's like to be an immigrant, what it's like to be a child of an immigrant class, what it's like to grow up in America and be a part of these different sort of classes. And I think that shows up in my work. My work is about my work is about class, race, and political identity. The name of my body of work for this show is called Living in Eden. Because I think that when we think of Eden, there's this whole idea of how wonderful it is and how green, and there's Adam and Eve, and when I think of Eden, I think of all the really fucked up things of the world. It's there's not just a snake and an apple. It's there's some really fucked up shit. You know what I mean? And when you look at all of this, it's kind of beautiful, but it's kind of dark and scary when you think about what Black people have had to really sort of endure over hundreds of years, what the British and colonialism has done, and how that displacement of people, how we're still dealing with that today. Afghanistan, there's just so much craziness, so that's what this is about. For a lot of Americans, there's this sense of there's no history. There is this sense of we're so detached from, our past. And I think part of that is because, we're not teaching the correct history in schools. We're not talking about the right things. I don't know, it's every kid, I think, should know what a fucking lobbyist is and what an impact that has in his or her life. From the get-go, from the time you're 7, you should know who the fuck these people are, because it's so fucked up, you know what I mean? It's everything. It's, politics, media, yeah. In American history, for African Americans, after slavery, you're supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. And very few people got the 40 acres and a mule. In the British part of colonialism, as you'll learn through parts of this, after slavery, the slave owners, they got compensated for the most part. They got payment for the people they lost, the slaves they owned. Let's just be blunt about it. And the thing was, the slaves got nothing in return. They got just their freedom. I mean, so when you think about it, it's not like today where basically like, oh, like I'm an influencer today, and then tomorrow I'm gonna be like an artist, and then tomorrow I'm gonna be like a musician, and there were not those choices. It was like you were stuck with what you had. If you were the guy who like was cutting corn or cutting cane, that's what you knew, and that's all you knew. So for me, it was like I wanted to put myself in situations and in places and reverse the whole idea of what it's like to be white and privileged. But I also wanted to bring it back to culture and home. This is a place that I'm really familiar with, and I really love it. And it has a really wonderful a place in my heart. And it's a place where I feel comfortable to create in also. So I was able to create these wonderful images talking about race, class, and money. And within that, officially it was called, I was thinking of code switching, because I was thinking about the ways how we code switch throughout life. How, as a kid, I would leave my neighborhood with my Jordans on, and then before I get to the Upper West Side, I'd have a pair of Clarks on, and a white shirt on. So there's this whole like thing that you have to do, this balance. So home is about a balance. I think because we're so removed, we've got all this history at our fingertips, and because we're so removed, I guess, from the rest of the world, we don't see what's happening. Like, if we're fighting a war, we don't ever see that war because of the coverage of what television, just snippets of what CNN and MSNBC and Fox is going to run. And I think that's the same with history. And I want people to really understand what goes on in the rest of the world. I want people to understand like the impact that the English, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish have had in countries like Guyana, and now what Exxon is now doing by being there, by now basically, found oil. For a country basically where the average person basically makes like $350 to $500, which is about 50 US to $75. So really think about it. Like Exxon oil, and a country basically where the average person makes that amount of money, you got a lot of issues happening. There are a lot of different things that inspire my work. There are a lot of different photographers, but it's not art photography. There's a lot of it is commercial photography. There's a lot of, as you can see, catalogs and different print media and stuff. There is no one artist, but there's a lot of different people. There's a lot of different, but I think it's more for me, what I'm influenced by is a lot more commercial than fine art. So it's like I bring that into like the fine art part of my work. With certain pieces, like with this piece right here, this is a photograph. And this is a collage that was done in Photoshop, and that part was added in Photoshop. The process is photography printed on canvas. Photography printed on canvas, glued to a panel, lacquered. But a lot of it is done in Photoshop. So a lot of it is like sort of pre-planned and playing. Yeah, I wanted to tell a story, and I wanted to feel very, to have a sort of like a comic book feel. But I also wanted to have like a very film aspect to it. I'm influenced by a lot of films, like a lot of old Hollywood films, like Giant, where you could see everything, where it was like ba-bum, it's like the screen open and it's like, whoa, that's wild, or like Peter Greenaway is to cook the thief, his wife, and her lover, and you get into the kitchen and you're like, whoa, did the camera just pan up and there's a castrati singing and there's like all this stuff and there's a chef and there's like someone dying and you're like, whoa, all that just happened in 2 minutes? You're like, whoa, you know? I like my work to sort of have that feeling in certain aspects, you know, where it has that wow factor, but also there's somber moments. So it's like, I like to think of it as like music maybe, like writing a score.
And it's sequential, left to right?
Yes, left to right. Yeah, so it starts out with The Sun Never Sets, which is over the British Empire. And then it ends with that one, which is The Ghost. The floor basically is the color of the flag of Guyana, which is right there, which is influenced by Paul Smith stripes. I play a lot with Paul Smith stripes at home on different things like walls and stuff. So I thought it would be really, sort of fitting for the space. This story right here is based on, well, not story. This is based on an article from The Guardian, which I can send you guys the link for. And then Exxon was added later as I was doing more research, because that's current. So this is more about sort of the past. And then this runs into like what's happening in the future and the whole bit. Yeah, it would be nice if someone like, you know, was able to point out like, well, this means da da da, and that's da da da. You know, for example, like the whole Exxon thing wasn't the first time like Exxon is Exxon. I mean, it isn't the first time America has had something to do with Guyana, which is, you know, there was the whole Jim Jones story also, which we forget. You know, and that was pretty big, you know, which was like a murder in the airport and, you know, and all that stuff. A congressman died, I believe. And yeah, lots of people drinking Kool-Aid, you know, drink the Kool-Aid. That saying came from there. But yeah. There's a lot of detail. I mean, there's a lot of information in there. You know, it's packed. And, you know, I mean, some people will just be like, oh, okay, oh. But it's, you know, it's designed in a, I mean, it's laid out in a way where it's accessible and it's not like beating you over the head.